Life is precious, and we all have the opportunity of living it to the fullest. Unfortunately, so few of us know how to manage it all. How do we account for our opportunities? How do we account for our time? How do we account for our relationships, health, spirituality, homes, finances, influence, and careers? How do we account for the one life we have to live? I am so glad you asked. In this program, you will find answers to all of these questions and more. Welcome to the Account for Your Life podcast with your host, the healthy accountant himself, Jay Moore.
What's happening, everybody? I want to welcome you back to this episode of the Account for Life podcast. And today we continue our series of Get Your Breakthrough Now. This is part two. This is part 2 of 7. Man, I'm super excited. And so let's jump right into this, and let's also just do a quick recap. What was the main thing in our first session that you have to get through? Main thing from our first session was you have to look at your current results. Like, you have to look at the results, whatever area you're looking for the breakthrough. Look at the current results. That's what I did. I looked at, I've struggled in the area of money, right? And, we're going to talk about, how that's a gift, along this breakthrough journey. But I struggled in an area of money, just being fully transparent, because look, who hasn't struggled with that? So I struggled in an area of money, breaking through to where it is I know I have to go. And so that was what I had to look at. I had to look at my results. I had to look at what was going on in my life, and I had to take an inventory and take an accounting. And then here's the question. Here's what we have to discover. What is the obstruction in me? What is the obstruction in me keeping me from what I desire? Keeping me from breaking free, breaking through. What is that obstruction? I'm going to tell you, you can't move forward until you find this out. I'm just being honest here. Like, you can listen to today, you can watch today, but you really can't move forward, because if you don't find the obstruction, I found it. I found mine. I'm not sure about you, but I found my obstruction. I'd never thought of it this way. So I found my obstruction. And here's the thing, I found it while I was sleeping. I found it as I was coming out of sleep, and it finally came to me what my obstruction has been for many, many years. You have to find it so you can document it and look at it and then really understand what it meant, because you're going to have the clue. You're going to have an understanding of what you have to do in order to move forward. So first day, you're going to break through by discovering what that obstruction is that's keeping you from that breakthrough and looking at your results. So today, part number 2, where are we going today? Because you've already found your obstruction. Now, really, see, once we find the obstruction, then there should be nothing that could stop us from moving. But before we move, we have to understand. We have to take in we have to take in something. And so what do we have to take in? We have to take in God's original intent for our life. God's original intent for our life. So I was thinking about the story of Abraham. And I love the story of Abraham. And the story of Abraham talks about what happened with Abraham's life. And I want to bring to your attention just some basics about this journey that Abraham went through. I know it starts in Genesis chapter 12. But in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 9, it just kind of gives us the backdrop of how everything started. And in Genesis chapter 1 through 9, I'm not going to read it. It talked about how Abraham was called. So if Abraham was called, then Abraham's being called because that's a part of God's original intent for his life. His original intent, God's original intent for Abraham's life was to help Abraham move through a series of things that's going to happen in his life to get him to where he is being called to. And it's so big. The thing that God promised him is so big that Abram, which is his first name, Abram couldn't experience everything in in God's original intent, because when God speaks into our life, God speaks into our life in such a way that our life, it keeps going, because God's word is true. So Abram was 75 years old, young, 75 years young when he was called. All right. So let's stop right here, because this story, if you read the Bible, just like I've read the Bible, you read the story, you understood what happened with Abraham. We sang songs about Abraham. Father Abraham had many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord, right on, left on, right. You may have heard that song before. I used to sing that song all the time, not realizing that Abraham, out of all the people living at that time, he listened. See, I think we get confused. I know I've gotten confused. When you hear God called Abraham, or the word of the Lord came to the man, did he actually come up physically to him? No, I don't believe he did. Just like, who's writing the book of Genesis? Moses. Was Moses face to face with God? No. Now, Moses had to learn all these things from God. More than likely, he learned them in a vision. Just like how I'm kind of sleeping, and then all of a sudden I get a message because I had a question. What's the obstruction in me? And then all of a sudden the answer comes. I got a couple of answers. I can't reveal where I'm really going with this series, because I don't want to spoil it for you. But I'm going somewhere with this series, and it came because the word of the Lord came to me and said, "Do it." And we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. So I'm not going to get into that particular topic today, but just imagine when you get a vision, when you see something, what is it that God wants us to see? So when we take a look at God's original intent, what does that mean? Purpose. God's original intent for your life is the purpose for which he created you. And this purpose for which he created us, when we look at Abraham's life, guys, when you read chapter 12 of Genesis, it gives us the backdrop, and then all of a sudden there's a problem. Verse 10, there's a problem. All the way to, I believe, the end of chapter 12, there's a problem. And here's the thing. The moment God calls you, there's going to be a problem. There has to be. See, God has to test to make sure that what he said about you is, he knows it's true, but he still has to test. He still has to make sure that it functions properly. So part of God's original intent for our life is that he ensures that the thing that he said functions correctly. And even though in chapter 12, Abraham, he started malfunctioning a little bit, but that didn't stop the word, because in chapter 13, I can't remember what verse, right at the very beginning, all of a sudden it talks about how Abraham was very rich. So think about this. God gave Abraham, even though he wasn't perfect, perfect, God gave Abraham riches and cattle and silver and gold, and it says he was very rich. God's like, well, I'm going to give you all the stuff that you have to have. So that's just a part of the journey. What's God testing for with Abraham? See, in Hebrews, when I think it's chapter 11, because that's a faith chapter, it goes through all these people who demonstrated the gift. What is the gift? They demonstrated the gift that they could expect more from things that they couldn't see. What does that really mean? It means that they had faith. They installed the function of faith into their life. That's what they did. I was recently talking to my niece back in December, and she is amazingly gifted. She's amazingly gifted at playing instruments, especially, the keyboards, the piano. She plays the drums, she plays the guitar, she sings, she writes. Like, she is so creative, and she is off the chain. We were talking because for some reason, I don't know why it came up, but I started asking her, well, how did you actually discover, like, how to discover your gift? And we went through, and she talked to me about it. And what it comes down to this, and that's how I discovered the obstruction in my life, and how that's what keep most of us from moving forward, from breaking through. What we discovered is that she had no obstruction in her to keep her from knowing how to play the piano. No obstruction. There was no disbelief. It was only, wow, I believe I can. Wow, I know I can. Wow, I know I will. Oh my goodness, yes, I did. And that's what happened for her life. She had no obstruction, and she moved in the expectation that God had already planned it with her. God's original intent for her life started with, let me go ahead and give you that. Like with Abraham, he's going to give Abraham's going to be a father of many nations. He didn't give that to him first. Oh, check that out. He did not give him fathering first. What did he give him first? He gave him riches first. Why did he give him riches? Because he needed it. Because he had already demonstrated the fact that he had no obstruction about what God said to him. God said, Abraham, I'm calling you, to another place. And Abraham said, man, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. And he went. So he counted. Listen, God counted that as righteousness. Think about it. God counted what he did as righteousness. And because he counted it as righteousness, then Abraham, he didn't even have to break through with anything. Now, he did have to break through. What did Abraham have to break through? Lying. Yeah, he had to break through lying. He finally realized he had to break through lying. But he didn't break through immediately. But he did have to break through. It took Abraham 15 years. Check this out. He was called at 75. Didn't have that baby until he was 100. Isaac, at least. They tried to manipulate the situation. Guys, how many of you have tried to manipulate to get your breakthrough? I can raise my hand there. I've manipulated to get my breakthrough. I've did the little white lies. I've kind of like, cut some corners here and there because I wanted more money. Or maybe I did a little bit of this, little bit of that. I was manipulating to get. Now, here's the thing. God blessed me otherwise. He blessed me otherwise. Just same as Abraham, I was getting blessings, but in the area that God is calling me into, you do not get the full breakthrough there until it's time. 15 years Abraham had to wait before Isaac came along. But they did try to manipulate the situation, which I did. Maybe you've tried to manipulate. So at this step, you're probably going to want to ask yourself, man, have I tried to manipulate God's intent for my life? Write that question down. Have I tried to manipulate God's intent for my life? That's if you know what that is. Now that I know what it is, look, God called me into the realm of money. I have to manage money well. I have to help people to manage money well. I have to have money. I have to be able to manage money. I have to be able to help people to manage money well. That's what God called me into, but I was terrible. The thing that we're terrible at is where God's calling us to. I'm telling you, it's so interesting how this works. So God's original intent requires us to install what? It's not even an installation because you already have it. We have to activate the faith function. We have to activate our expectation for what it is that we know we can't see, but we know we can see it. Did I say that right? Yes. What we know we can't see, but we know we can see it. Like I can't see the fact that God's called me into a place where I've never been. But then I know that God's called me there because he's shown it to me. He showed me how easy it would be. He showed me how simple it would be. But he gave me a stipulation. He says, you will call on my name and you will keep my name in your mouth and you will constantly move. You will constantly move towards who I am. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the kingdom success formula. So let's do a quick understanding of where we are today. You're looking for a breakthrough and you found the obstruction in you. Now it's, what's the original intent for my life? And to discover the original intent for your life is to just ask that question. What is the original intent for my life? You just got to ask. That's the simple question. There's a lot of questions you can ask, but we're going to stick to what's the original intent for my life. See, within this process, that's when we have to expect God to answer. We have to expect to hear. We have to expect to just say, I know this is what it is. You have to expect it. You have to believe. You have to know. That's the faith function. You have to know that our greatest gift that God's given everybody is our expectation to know something, even though we can't see it physically. God's original intent for our life is simple. And by discovering your obstruction and then moving towards what the intention is, just moving towards, it doesn't require you to be like, so boom. But because you found the thing that you struggle with, then, hey man, let's just move there. Because you don't have to see something. You're not going to find something totally different. You don't have to find anything totally different at this point. Look, I struggled with money. I struggle with money. I've been in the money realm all my life. From the time I was a kid, I was into money. So I know that's where God's been calling me there from the time I was looking at the $20 bill. I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. I know this is in my future. I know I'm going to have this. I know it. I just didn't know how. And I didn't understand expectation. I didn't understand faith. And man, oh man, that's where he's calling me. What is God's original intent for your life? Look, I'm not telling you. Look, breaking through, would you rather break through or would you rather stay broke? Would you rather break through or would you rather stay broke? So if you would rather break through, it's important that you spend time on this. This isn't one of these things where, even though I'm going to do this in 7 days, this isn't something that you're going to potentially do in 7 days. But here's what you can do right now, and then I'm going to let you go. You can expect, you can believe, and you can move forward. That's it. That's what you can do today. You do not listen. You do not have to know anything. All you have to do is say, okay, let's go. Because let's look back at Abraham. Up to that point, there's no record of anybody being called. Here it is. I mean, outside of Noah, right? Here's Abraham. And they go through the lineage of people that was already living, Abraham's descendants. And he comes to Abraham. Do you not think everybody was called? Everybody got the call. God is so good that he's going to call you. He's going to call me. And if we don't answer the phone, then that means that we lose. So Abraham listened, he heard, and he left, even though he had a home already. But he believed what he had heard, and God counted it as righteousness. What can God count as righteousness in your life today? Guys, I appreciate you for joining me for this episode of the Account for Your Life podcast. Jay Moore here to help the account and help you to account for your life. God bless. I will see you on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us, listening friends. We are so glad you invested this time with us. Always remember, you only have one life to live, so live it to the fullest. This has been the Account for Your Life podcast with your host, the healthy accountant himself, Jay Moore. Until next time, make it a great day.